The road to peace between the United States and Cuba has been laid out, and anyone who's not caught up in some kind of dogmatism is well aware that this signals the end of the revolutionary era in Cuba. But of all the opinions that have been thrown around, all the opinions that have been given, there's one person whose opinion that matters, who hasn't given it yet, the big man himself, El Jefe, Fidel Castro. Well, what's happened now is that he has finally broken his silence on the issue and made his opinion known about what's transpiring in the country today. Recently, he broke his silence on the matter and decided to speak publicly. He laid out his thoughts in a letter addressed to the Student Federation of the University of Havana, printed in the Communist Party paper, Granma. I don't trust the policy of the United States, nor have I exchanged a word with them, but this does not mean I reject a pacifist solution to the conflicts. We will always defend cooperation and friendship with all peoples of the world, including with our political adversaries. Defending peace is the duty of everyone. Any peace or negotiated solution to the problems between the United States and the peoples, or any people of Latin America, that does not imply force or the use of force should be treated in accordance with international norms and principles. The serious dangers that threaten humanity today should give way to the rules that are compatible with human dignity. No country is excluded from such rights. With this spirit, I have fought and will continue fighting until my last breath. The President of Cuba has taken the appropriate steps in agreement with the prerogatives and powers granted him by the National Assembly and the Communist Party of Cuba. It's very clear that Fidel has expressed a great distrust with the United States, that he does not trust their motives and frankly just does not trust them in general. But something more significant has been said here. He has given Raul and the people his blessing to go ahead and enact these reactionary principles. One cannot help but notice that he's making a very similar line that Khrushchev made when he began the revisionist era of declaring peaceful coexistence with the United States. This is the same kind of reactionary talk that Mao gave in the 1970s when he entered his reactionary phase. It's very clear here that it is his intention to give blessing to the United States to move in and begin appropriating capital within Cuba that will spell the end of revolution. Marx spoke quite clearly that which gives the bourgeoisie its power. Their class position was their ownership of the means of production. This is what the U.S. completely intends to get in their grasp. Raul seems intent upon allowing them to do so, perhaps with some kind of state-imposed restrictions. What Raul's doing is playing the imperialist game. They can come in, but he'll keep an eye on them to make sure they don't get out of control. Unfortunately for Cuba, this is what it's going to take to bring the country's downfall. All the United States needs to do is get enough influence in the economy, particularly in the wages sector, to start exercising some kind of influence in the country. And you know, the first thing that they're going to go for is cheap labor, to lower the cost of production in order to stave off the falling rate of profit. Now, once they've done that, and they begin buying up factories and machines, they begin to own capital. If the ownership of capital is power, then who should have it? The foreign firms or the domestic proletarian state? And this is exactly what is going to bring the end of revolutionary Cuba. Many people might think to ask, what's the difference between this and special economic zones, particularly those employed by the DPRK and in some cases, but not all, in China? In the case of special economic zones, the capital, machines, labor, etc., is not owned by the foreign firm. A domestic or even state company does and allows the foreign firm to direct their use, organize them in a particular way to create the commodities desired, but they cannot own them. They cannot exercise a dictatorship over them. They have no legal claim to them. The means of production can always be seized away and put to another use. The foreign firm owns the product of labor, but not the productive capital itself. Such a capitalist may take these commodities and send them away for profits, but they do not control the productive power itself. There are even measures that can be taken to negate imperialist rent, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Even special economic zones with their own risks when dealing with the imperialists, but they are a likely, relatively safe compromise. It should be noted for historical reasons that this isn't the first time that Cuba has sold out. This has been going on for some time. This happened first under the revisionist Soviet Union, where Cuba ended up becoming a satellite state in the true sense. In other words, its economy was orientated directly towards the needs and wants of the Soviet Union. And then later on, other areas in Europe, like France, for example. So what we're seeing here is not something new, but we're seeing the same thing on a higher qualitative level. Fidel Castro predicted this very thing, as he has seen in other leaders before him. Khrushchev became revisionist when he declared his intention for peaceful coexistence with the capitalist powers. The same is true of Mao in the 1970s. He himself has fallen to this very same phenomenon. This, I think, is a very important quote that comes from him when he's actually talking about the Cultural Revolution. If we are going to argue, basically, we must tell some basic truths and we must unmask everything that is of fascist type hidden under Marxist emblems. Of course, this story of revolutionaries who, in spite of having done good things in their lives, have committed great barbarities later in the end of their lives is not new. During the past days, we have seen with sorrow the things that men are capable of doing when they degenerate. They are a result, in part, of having confused Marxism-Leninism with fascism, with absolutism. They are the result of having introduced the style of absolute monarchies into the contemporary socialist revolutions. This revolution, fortunately, is a revolution of young men, and we hope that it will always be a revolution of young men. We hope that all revolutionaries, as we become biologically old, are capable of understanding that we are becoming biologically and lamentably old. Castro is specifically talking about the Cultural Revolution here. And now, in fact, he's actually wrong about that. That was not a reactionary thing. It was actually the greatest advancement in socialism ever. But his point still remains that when many revolutionaries, particularly great ones, get older, they tend to get reactionary. The same thing happened to Stalin. The same thing happened to Hoxha. The same thing happened to a lot of leaders. The point here is that the revolution is to be continued under young men with fresh new enthusiasm and sometimes fresh new ideas for the new material conditions in which people find themselves. And in this case, I think the same thing has happened to Fidel Castro. Later on, he actually went on to deny that this old age problem applied to him. But I think we can see from his own very words, in cautiously accepting the United States into Cuban territory, is a sure sign that he is in his old age. If you like this video and you'd like to see more of them, then head over to my Patreon page and show your support. Or you can go to the MRN bookstore and check out some of the latest books available. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and share on various social media.